you ready to help me send Joe Biden back to his basement in Delaware? I can make one pledge for sure. When I'm president, no cocaine in the White House. We are not going to do it. We may have some problems with my 6, 5, and 3-year-old with finger painting and things like that, but it's going to all be very G-rated. So it's great to be here. I'm excited to be back in Iowa. It is a little bit of Florida heat, although, you know what, I've seen a lot worse, just telling you, someone that was born and raised in Florida. But we have a situation where our country is in decline. We see it, we feel it. We see it in the economy, we see it in our military, and we see it with our culture. It's not going to be enough for Republicans to just manage the decline a little bit better than the Democrats. And I'm running for president because our mission is very simple. We must reverse American decline, and we must give this country a new birth of freedom. And we're going to get this done. You know, Biden, he's out there. You know what I always say, as I'm bouncing around to different states, he's usually in multiple states a day, state of confusion, disorientation, but he's bopping around there bragging about what he's done with the economy. And I'm just thinking to myself, does anybody feel better off than they did prior to him becoming president? Everything's more expensive, things are harder to come by. He wants to impose his agenda to control your behavior. That's why he's attacking our American domestic energy. That's why they borrowed and printed and spent so much money. You can't just borrow money at that rate and not have things like inflation happen. And so this is something that was very much predicted when they were doing this, and people told them not to do it. Look, don't tell me we can't manage our nation's finances better than what they're doing now. You guys in Iowa manage your state's finances better because you have a really good governor, Governor Reynolds. You got a lot of great legislators that have done a lot of great work. And yet in Florida, since I became governor, we've actually paid down almost 25% of our state's outstanding debt. Can you imagine actually paying down debt in Washington? So it can be done, but here's what happens. When they borrow, print, and spend, Washington benefits from that. Washington gets wealthier. Right now, 7 of the 10 wealthiest counties in our country are suburbs of Washington, D.C. How does that happen? They're not producing much of anything. It's all about the debt and the things that they're doing there. And who pays it? The average person pays it, with everything becoming more expensive. And now the American dream is out of reach for many people who are just working hard, doing everything right. And now you have interest rates are skyrocketing. It's hard to afford a home and a car. And that is what Bidenomics is. At the end of the day, Bidenomics means you pay more, your standard of living goes down, and you're supposed to thank him for the courtesy of putting you in that position. We need to do better, and we need to reverse Bidenomics, and that's what we're going to get done when we go to Washington. And part of that is, yes, they need to stop spending, and we'll push back as president on Congress 100%. We need to open up our domestic energy production and be fully energy independent in this country. We have such an opportunity with all the stuff we can do here in America to have a great competitive advantage over many countries in the world, and yet Biden, he wants to force people to buy things like electric cars. Now, first of all, it's hard to afford some of these things. Second of all, it's not what people want. Third of all, who makes the components to go into that? China. So it makes us more dependent on China instead of us being dependent on ourselves. And so we're not going to do the Green New Deal. We're not going to do the bureaucracy, all the regulations, none of that. We're going to make sure that we have a birth of freedom in the economy so that people that are doing small businesses and are working hard, have a chance to make it. He does not want that. He wants to control behavior. He wants his political agenda to take precedent over your well-being, and that's not going to lead to opportunity for our country. So we're going to do that, and I think we're going to do that very, very strongly. We also got to get this education system of ours out of whack, back into whack, because we've had a generation of students that have gone through universities, and don't get me wrong, we've got a lot of great universities, there's a lot of great degrees, but there's a lot of people that have gone deep into debt. They get a degree in zombie studies, and then they end up working in a job that they didn't even need to go to college for, and yet they have a lot of debt. So the idea that the only way you can succeed is to go to a four-year college, that's not true. It's good for some, it's not required for all, and there are other pathways where people can do very, very well. So in Florida, we've doubled apprenticeships in the state of Florida. We actually have... Oh, God bless you. You have a place there? Where? Plantation. Okay, yeah. That's a good area. So we doubled apprenticeships. We now have workforce education in middle schools. We just signed a bill to do that. And we have our state colleges, everything mobilized to provide skills for people. And guess what? You have no debt. You have tangible skills. And we've got these kids, they're 20 years old and they're making $100,000 in some of these industries. That gives people opportunity. That gives people hope for a better future. And oh, by the way, it's better for our economy because those are the types of skills we need if we want to do more in manufacturing and produce more things. We can't have everything made in China. That is not going to work. This country being dependent on China, who is a threat to our country, we need to declare economic independence from China, and we need to do it the American way. When you talk about the economy, it's not just about dollars and cents. Honestly, it's not even mostly about dollars and cents. It's, what is the purpose of an economy and economic policy? And I think the left believes that they use the economy to be able to advance their power over society. That's the number one thing that they want to do with it. For me, I view it as, okay, we're a country with an economy, not the other way around. We're citizens of a republic. We're not just cogs in the wheel of some global enterprise or some global economy. And so we have to have an economy that ultimately, if you work hard, if you get the most out of your God-given ability, and you play by the rules, you got to be able to do well in America. That should be the goal of an economy. And if we get that right, everything else will be fine. So we're going to get that done. We're also going to get done, look, one of the things, people that have, Florida connections probably know this, but the one thing that even my critics will acknowledge about me is, if I tell you I'm going to do something, I get it done. I do it. No empty promises, no slogans. We're going to get it done. And so one of the first things we'll do as president is we will immediately solve this border crisis once and for all in this country. We've got to get it done. So we'll declare a national emergency. We'll mobilize all available resources, including our military. We'll stop the invasion. Yes, we will build a border wall, because I do think you need that. It's wide open down there. But one of the things I'm going to do that no one's been willing to do up to this point, we are going to hold the Mexican drug cartels accountable for what they are doing. They are engaging in human trafficking. They are engaging in sex trafficking, and they are moving massive amounts of fentanyl into our country that are killing tens of thousands of Americans every year. There are mothers in almost every community in this country that have lost loved ones, lost kids to fentanyl overdose. And so to just sit there and let them get away with murder, that is not leadership, and that is not acceptable. I was down at the border. I've been down there a bunch of times, and I was in Arizona a couple months ago, and there actually was a big piece of border wall there. It kind of stopped out in the distance. It just stopped. So a lot of the people just went around the wall. But if you go further away, there was places where I saw people sitting there working on the wall. And I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, well, the cartels cut through the wall and they bring in product through here. And I'm like, they're just allowed to do that? Nobody's doing anything about it? And so we're going to have military and border patrol. They're going to have the ability with rules of engagement. If the cartels are coming into our country with fentanyl, if someone broke into your house, you would hold them accountable. You would use force to repel them. So we're going to authorize that at the border. So if the cartels are trying to break into our country, it's going to be the last thing they do, because they're going to end up stone cold dead. We also need to ensure that we recognize part of the reason we're in the mess we're in now is because of how the federal government responded to COVID-19, embracing school closures, lockdown policies. You saw a massive transfer of wealth from small businesses and middle class to technology companies like Amazon and Facebook and Apple. They have gone through the roof in terms of all their value. Meanwhile, there's been a lot of stagnation in many parts of the country. Not as much in Iowa because you had good leadership, not in Florida because we fought back against that. At the end of the day, you had to make a decision. Are you going to stand there against the mob and against the media and against the left and against Dr. Fauci, plant your flag and do what's right and fight for the people you represent? Or are you going to run and hide because you don't want to be criticized? In Florida, we stood up and fought for our people. We fought for their right to work. We fought for their right to run businesses. We fought for the right of kids to be in school. Fast forward today, Florida's economy is ranked #1 out of all 50 states. We lead the nation in new business formations. We have no income tax. You all should try that sometime. It's really, really good. And you see other things. And so we became a haven for people who were seeking freedom during a very dark time in our country's history. And we are proud to have served that function, but we also have to recognize that was not the experience. What happened in Iowa and Florida is not the experience that happened in many parts of the country. There were parts of the country that have been hollowed out by these draconian policies. And so when I'm president, we are going to bring a reckoning to the people who were involved in those policies, like Dr. Fauci. We need accountability. We have to hold them accountable. And the reason is because they act like they did it right, even though we know that that has been very, very destructive. Kids not being able to be in school for a year, how is that something that's good? So we're going to bring accountability, partially because it's necessary to hold people accountable, but partially because if we hold them accountable for this, they will never be able to do this to our country again. And we've got to make sure that that's the case. We also will do battle with a movement led by a bunch of people on the far left, and they're advancing an ideology which has been termed a woke ideology. And look, people say this woke, that woke. I mean, at the end of the day, this is like cultural Marxism. It's a rejection of truth, it's a rejection of merit, and it's something that has infected a lot of institutions. Now, sometimes people say, oh, don't worry about woke, don't worry about this. Well, first of all, there's value in having our society be based in the truth. Don't tell me that a man can get pregnant and expect me to believe that, because I will not, because it is not true. But beyond that, when this agenda infects institutions, it has an impact on people's daily lives. When you have the economy, portions of the economy taken over by this movement called ESG, they call it environment, social governance, but all it is using business to advance an ideological agenda and to do things through the economy which they could never achieve through the ballot box. When that takes hold, the average person will end up poorer as a result of those policies. When you have woke overtake things like education, that leads to students becoming indoctrinated, and it leads to our students performing poorer as a result of that. And you can take that to the bank. When it happens to crime and criminal justice and law enforcement, you end up like they have in San Francisco and Chicago and all these cities where the inmates are running the asylum and average families are less safe as a result. So it's important that if that ideology takes over institutions in our country, it's important for us to recognize it will destroy this country. We cannot allow what's happened in San Francisco to happen across the United States of America. We will fight the woke in the schools, we will fight the woke in the businesses, we'll fight the woke in the halls of Congress. We will never surrender to the woke mob. We are going to make sure woke ideology ends up in the dustbin of history where it belongs. And some kind of flowing from that a little bit. So, I was somebody growing up, a blue-collar family. I was told you got to earn it in life. So I worked minimum wage jobs, trying to get through school, doing all this stuff to give myself an opportunity to do things in society, but particularly to be able to make a good living and all this stuff. Well, that was kind of my plan, and then 9/11 happened, and so I decided to volunteer and serve in the United States military as a naval officer, and it was the type of thing. It was the type of thing where, I would have made a lot more money, of course, doing other things, but our country was in conflict. We didn't have a draft, and I felt like, I got to do my part, however small, to be able to serve the nation that I was proud to be a citizen of. So we did that. I served in a bunch of different places, including in places like Fallujah in Iraq, Ramadi. I was attached to Navy SEAL Team 1 during the height of all that was going on over there. And the thing that I took away from that experience is, wearing the cloth of your country is just different than doing anything else that you'll do in life. To have that American flag, on your uniform, to be able to serve next to patriots, and to be working together to serve a cause greater than yourself. That's something that's meaningful. And so I've always been thankful for everybody who's worn the uniform, thankful for our veterans through the years. I was down the street, we went to a great place where they're helping vets. We still have some World War II vets. I ran into a fellow the other day here in Iowa, very impressive guy, World War II. Of course, we've lost most of that generation. We still have Korean War veterans. We're losing many of them. Our Vietnam veterans, we're very thankful for their service because they were not treated the way they should have been treated. And, subsequent generations like me have said, we're sorry that happened, but we definitely are thankful for your service. And then in my generation, 9/11, it was an all-volunteer generation. Very small percentage of people served. A lot of them had to do multiple tours of duty, but they stood up when it matters. And I think there's a sense of pride. But yet, you look today, our recruiting is at the lowest level since the draft was abolished after Vietnam. They've driven warriors off. A lot of veterans say they don't want their kids or grandkids to join today's military. And that's a tragedy. That is sad. That is not the way things should be. But it's like that in part because the military has been indulging in things like social experimentation, political agenda, and even having woke ideology. That takes the focus off the mission. And so as Commander-in-Chief on day one, we are going to rip out all the politicization of the military, and we are going to restore the military to its proper function. Mission first. You're going to see more recruiting. You're going to see people that are going to want to serve. And as Commander-in-Chief, one of the things I will do using the bully pulpit of the presidency is I'll make it very clear to young people that pursuing a time serving in uniform is a noble calling. You will have the gratitude of your fellow citizens if you do that. And I think you're going to see a resurgence of people that want to join. Final thing I'll say is on some of these issues, our Constitution has made us unique as a people. Our founders, when they went in to do the Constitutional Convention in 1787, they had studied the history of every republic and the history of mankind, and they tried to draw lessons from all those experiences. And what they noticed was there was really only one thing that all these republics had in common, and it was this. Every single one of them had failed. And so they understood it fell to the United States of America to determine whether people could really govern themselves whether you could have a society based on the rule of law rather than the rule of individual men, or were we going to live under various forms of tyranny for the rest of human history? And so when Benjamin Franklin walked out of the convention, he was asked, did you give us a republic or a monarchy? He said a republic if you can keep it. Because they understood you could have the best declaration, constitution in the world. They do not run on autopilot. They require each generation of Americans to step up and answer the call to preserve and protect liberty. And sometimes that may mean we send a merry band of brothers to the shores of Normandy to fight Nazi Germany. Sometimes that means where we are now, that we have patriotic Americans step up through this political process and demand that our Constitution be restored. And that's what we need right now, because how this government operates in Washington is not consistent with what the Founding Fathers envisioned. They never created a fourth branch of government, an administrative state that issues rules and governs us without our consent. And yet, what kind of car can you drive? What kind of energy you can use? All these things are being done through bureaucracies, not through your elected representatives. I mean, you have, where's the doctor at? She was here, your congresswoman. Now, she wouldn't vote for any of that stuff, but if you have a representative that's voting for that, you could vote them out. You can't vote out the bureaucrats. So they've taken a lot of power from we the people. They're exercising it in ways that the Constitution didn't envision, and we need to reconstitutionalize this federal government. That's why you see things like weaponization of agencies, because nobody's held them accountable. The founders understood human nature being what it is. People will abuse their power if there are checks and balances. And so with me, we're going to go in on day one. You're going to have a new director of the FBI. You're going to have house cleaning at the Department of Justice. You're going to have an end to the weaponization of government. And we are going to ensure that the days of this bureaucracy imposing its will on us without our consent are over. And it's going to be time that we, the people, impose our will on this government. And that's why my pledge, and we are going to get that done. So, and I know there's a lot more stuff, and I'm happy to talk about other stuff, but here's the deal. None of this stuff is going to matter unless we win. And Republicans have lost a lot of elections in recent years, not in Iowa, not in Florida. You know, we were supposed to have a red wave throughout the country. I saw one here. You saw one in Florida. You didn't see it throughout the rest of the country. And the reality is, we've got to do better as a party if we want to get this country back in shape. And so what we've been able to do in Florida is, I took a state that had been decided by 1 point for a decade, very close elections. I came in a very close election. We went in, we got to work, we governed boldly and unapologetically. We delivered big results for the people of our state. And 4 years later, running for re-election, we didn't win by less than 1% in 32,000 votes. We won by over 1.5 million votes in almost 20%. That's what you call winning. That is what we need to be doing. But it's all about the results. And so, we mentioned Florida. Our economy has outperformed the nation. We have a massive budget surplus. We've paid down 25% of our state debt since I've been governor. We've defended Second Amendment rights. We've enacted universal school choice. We've prohibited the Chinese Communist Party from buying land in Florida. We've stood up against criminals where we have the death penalty for pedophiles in the state of Florida. And our crime rate's at a 50-year low. We have stood up against left-wing prosecutors funded by people like George Soros. I'm the only governor in America that's removed a Soros-funded prosecutor because he wasn't willing to enforce the law. We've also stood up for the innocence of our children and the rights of our parents. Parents have a fundamental right to direct the education and upbringing of their kids. Schools are important, school districts are important, all this stuff matters, but those institutions do not exist to supersede the rights of parents. They should be working with parents to be able to educate kids in the best way possible. And what I see, you listen to Biden and he says, they're not your kids, they're all of our kids. What does he mean by that? What he means is parents should just butt out. that a kid goes to school, that somehow you as a parent shouldn't have a right to know what curriculum's being taught, to know basic things about how they're treating your kid, that you should butt out so that they can use the schools to impose their agenda on your kids. That is wrong. That is not the appropriate use of schools. We need education in this country, not indoctrination in this country. And when we fight back on that, the left gets mad, the media gets mad. We had the tussle in Florida about having gender ideology in the schools. They actually, in some parts of this country, I was actually talking to somebody who was telling me, there was a first grader in the family, and the first grader's being asked by teachers, "Are you sure you're a boy? Are you sure you're a boy?" The idea that some kindergartner or second grader is just going to change their gender is totally unacceptable for that to be going on in our schools, and parents should not have to deal with that. But yet, that's what they want to do. So in Florida, we said no. We said we're going to, and Iowa's done similar, we said we're not going to do that. Now, the left got very mad at us, the media got very mad at us, and there was a company in Central Florida, some of you may have heard of, that wasn't too happy with us, called Disney. And at the end of the day in Florida, usually whatever Disney wanted would be done because they had a real serious control over the political process for many, many decades, until I arrived on the scene, until I showed up, because at the end of the day, leadership is about standing up for the people that you represent, standing up for the innocence of our children, standing up for the rights of parents. Leadership is not subcontracting out your office to a woke corporation based in Burbank, California. And we refuse to do that, and we stood for what's right. And we'll continue to do it. And we also have stood up for the idea that you should not have things in the schools like critical race theory. We're not teaching kids to hate our country or to hate each other. We're going to teach actual history, we're going to teach facts, but it's not going to be with an agenda. And people are now trying to attack us on this in Florida, and they have this hoax that Kamala Harris is trying to do, saying, we had people, because when we got rid of critical race theory, what they said was, oh, you don't want to teach about any black history. They're equating political activism with history. And that was not actually true. In the bill we signed, it said you needed to do all the key things about all of American history, including about African Americans. And so there was a working group that was developed with African American history scholars in Florida, many of whom were black themselves, and they developed all these standards, and really robust. And most states do not have any standards for this. I think we're one of 13 or 14 states, so they did it. Harris started, this was all done in wide open, the people were seeing this, all this stuff, no one said a word, everything goes out. The standards come out, and then Harris says that somehow Florida is teaching that having chattel slavery was good. Nobody has said that, and the standards said just the opposite. But she runs with the lie, and the media repeats the lie. And here's the thing. Republicans need to fight back against these lies. Do not let them get away with smearing people. Do not let them get away with perpetuating hoaxes. We're going to tell the truth, and we're going to stand up for what's right. So that's what ends up happening. So the bottom line, though, is we've got to get this education system in order in this country, because if we don't, if we're not going to be there for our kids and doing what's right, future generations, they're just not going to have a chance the way they should be. So we're committed to doing that, and we're happy to be able to lead that effort as president. So so in Florida, we've stood up for all that. Whenever we said we'd do something, we got it done. And I think it's important because you got to win the White House, but you can't stub your toe once you get in there and not get anything done. You got to have everything ready to go. You only have certain periods of time where you can work with Congress to really get all this done. We will be ready to do that. We will be very focused. We will be very thorough. And from January 20th, 2025, you're going to see like a freight train just every day. We're going to be doing one thing after another, and it's going to be hard to keep up with us. Media on the left will attack us, and we'll be doing something else the next day and something else the next day. But that's what we need. We need an energetic president. We need somebody that's going to be pushing the envelope, making sure that we change the direction of this country. Because if we don't get it done in 2024, we are going to be in a deep hole. It's going to be very difficult to dig our way out of. And so there's no excuses this time. We must get the job done. I will get the job done. God bless you all.
So if you have a mental health disorder and you can't work in the military, what all does that include? Because a lot of the new generation, I'm only 15, so this may not matter as much. I can't legally vote, but I struggle with major depressive disorder.
Well, it's never stopped the other party from not letting you vote, so I'll just, put that out. Go ahead.
And I suffer with anxiety, and it is a big deal for me in my family. What if I want to work in the military, but I cannot because of these mental health disorders that I have?
Well, I don't really know what all the things on the military are for that, and I don't know whether yours are covered or not. Look, I think at the end of the day, when you're dealing with the military, what it's all about is they have certain things that they need, and those are the things that are going to be there. So, I mean, there were people that weren't able to go because of physical disabilities or whatever. It's not a reflection on anybody, and I'm not suggesting you wouldn't be able to serve, but there are going to be some criteria for both physical and mental that are done, and it's all about just whatever the best for the unit is, and to try to do that. So I'll take a look, though, at the specific things about that. I don't know that that's the case. At least when I was there, I know that there were people, that were able to manage all kinds of things and serve very, very well. So if you can do it, we welcome people to do it.
All right, anybody else? What do we got? Yeah, Governor, thank you so much for visiting Iowa. It's a privilege to see you live. President Ronald Reagan had a clear foreign policy set up before he became president. What is your foreign policy?
So the challenges that President Reagan handled so successfully were significant, but they were different than what we face today. At the same time, I think the basic approach of peace through strength is the right approach. If we are strong at home economically, if we get our military back in shape and we're able to do the type of expansion of capabilities that we need to do, particularly to be able to project power in places like the Pacific, we're going to be able to remain the world's top superpower, and we will deter conflict from happening. President Reagan deployed troops one time to Grenada, a very small operation, because people didn't want to mess with him. The bad guys were not, they didn't want to get in his crosshairs. So when you're strong, unlike Biden, you deter a lot of bad activity, and that's the goal. The goal of having a strong military is not to try to invite a bunch of wars. You want to stay out of conflict, but even going back to George Washington, they say the best way to avoid war is to prepare for it. So we're going to have a strong military. Our view, so when Reagan came in, yes, we need to have a strong military. So our view, so when Reagan was president, and this really from World War II on, the focus point of American foreign policy overwhelmingly was containment of the Soviet Union. And so that was a focus on NATO, on Europe, because Soviets had the Eastern European sphere of influence. We were worried about them barreling into other countries in Europe. And there were other proxy fights around the globe, Vietnam, all these others. But that was really the main thing. If you look now, our main threat to this country comes from China. And the reason why China is the main threat is because, unlike the Soviet Union in the post-Cold War, China's economy is almost as big as our economy is. You go back when Reagan came in, he did the big defense buildup and he bankrupted the Soviet Union. Their economy was way weaker than ours. China is close to a peer competitor, and a lot of the reasons China is so powerful is because our policies here in the United States have really empowered them. Bringing them into the World Trade Organization, giving them most favored nation trade status. If you look when they did that in like 99, 2000, they said China's going to become more democratic. We're going to be able to sell them more stuff. We're not going to lose industry to China. They actually said that we wouldn't lose industry. We've lost massive industry to China. They said we wouldn't have forced technology transfers. They wouldn't dump product in our country, and yet all of that has proven to not have been the case. But what has happened is China has expanded its military capability. China has a leader now, Xi Jinping, who is very ideological, and they want to supplant the United States as the world's leading superpower. So I think our national security strategy has got to be built around deterring China from supplanting us as the world's top superpower. And the reason why it's important is because that will affect your life if they internationally. You already see it to a certain extent. If there's something in a movie that China doesn't like, Hollywood will take it out. If you have the NBA, someone says something about human rights in China, they have to genuflect, they have to apologize for doing that because people are so concerned about what the CCP would do. We also need to do things here at home to blunt their influence like we did in Florida. They should not be able to come into Iowa and purchase farmland. Why would we want them to have access to our food supply? But I think if we're strong, and we got to do better economically at home. I mean, we got to grow at 3% or more. If we don't, we're not going to be able to deal with a lot of our financial challenges. But I think if we're strong economically, if we do what we need to with the military, we will be able to deter China from doing something like invading Taiwan because they respect strength. They respect power. That's all the language they talk. Right now, with Biden's weakness, he's putting us down a path where we will eventually probably end up fighting a war against China in the future and probably losing that war. So we cannot let that happen, and we will have a much different approach, but it'll be an approach that's rooted in President Reagan's wisdom, and it's going to be an approach that is keeping this country safe.
Next question.
What are your policies? What do you plan to do with our Social Security and Medicare?
So great. I mean, so in Florida, we know a little bit about senior citizens, and so we understand how important Social Security and Medicare are, and we'll make sure that folks have those benefits that they were promised, and I think that's very, very important. In Medicare, I think that Medicare is no different than other health programs. It costs a lot of money more than it was envisioned because our healthcare system is so out of whack. So it's a reflection of that. So what I'd like to do is address the healthcare system writ large. You basically have big pharma running the show, massive insurance companies, and big bureaucracies. The patient gets lost in all of that. And our healthcare system is not as good as it should be as a result of that. So having more patient-centered, less power in the big institutions, I think it can cause to have a better market where people can get the services they need for cheaper, and that will trickle into everything I think that's happening on government programs as well as the private sector. What do we got right here?
This will be the last question. So when you are our next president, which you will be, the state of our media is crazy. How do you communicate with all Americans so your message is heard, understood, and you can enact all the promises you're making? Because I know you can.
Thank you. God bless. Yeah, so look, at the end of the day, you just got to go out and speak to folks directly. And as president, you'll have a lot of institutional advantages with that. Similar to me being governor, like Florida, it's a state thing, so it doesn't permeate nationally as much. But as governor, I show up, I do something somewhere. They can editorialize negatively all they want, but when people see from the horse's mouth, they either like it or they don't, and they like what we do, so they support us. And I think it's the same thing. I think when you have all the nonsense that gets spewed in our society, online, media, all this stuff, the negative is that can kind of crowd out or mask what's true. But the positive of that is that people know they're being lied to. They know these are phony narratives. They know how the game is played. So if you just stand up there and forthrightly speak the truth, right now in this day and age, it's powerful. People want to hear it, and I think that's the reason we've been successful in Florida, because Lord knows no governor has been attacked as much as I have in the last 4 years, and yet we've stood strong, and we're able to deliver a landslide victory. So we will be out speaking to people directly, we'll be speaking the truth, and that may mean, as president, with the bully pulpit, but it also means as a candidate now going to smaller counties like we've been doing on this tour and speaking with people. You know, we were down in Centerville, they're like, I'm surprised you came. It's so great that you came to our community. It's important to get in these communities. So we're going to continue doing that throughout Iowa, throughout New Hampshire, and throughout all these states. And then for the general election, I can tell you this. I am not going to let Biden get away with sitting in his basement this election. We are going to run him ragged. We are going to be all over this country, and we are going